The following news flash is brought to you by the Lone Star Lowdown, providing your daily bulletins for the commodities market. Today in history, news updates, and the inside scoop into the tides of the alternative. Markets for Monday, the 20th of June, 2016, are currently trading with gold at $1,286.93 an ounce, silver $17.48 an ounce, Texas crude $47.98 a barrel, and Bitcoin is still on the way up, currently at 735 U.S. currency. Today in history, the year 1949. The CIA Act of 1949, or Public Law 110, which permitted the Central Intelligence Agency to use confidential fiscal and administrative procedures and gave the organization exemption from many of the usual limitations on the use of federal funds, along with exemption from having to disclose its organizational functions, officials, titles, salaries, or numbers of personnel employed, was signed into Congress. As a result, many legal analysts point out that the CIA is effectively not part of the U.S. government. The CIA Act of 1949 passed Congress today in history. In recent news, the United Nations said today that a record 65.3 million people were registered as displaced by persecution and conflict in 2015 alone, the highest annual figure since the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees started keeping records. It's the first time the 60 million barrier was passed. Crunching the numbers, this places 1 in every 113 people on the earth as now qualifying as a refugee, an asylum seeker, or internally displaced in their home country. Decades of fighting in Afghanistan and Somalia and conflicts in places such as Syria, South Sudan, and Yemen lifted the total number of refugees to 21.3 million, more of half of which are said to be children, according to the UNHCR. The Israeli government approved roughly $20 million in additional financing for Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank this last Sunday. In some remark before the weekly cabinet meeting on Sunday, Mr. Netanyahu, the leader of the conservative Likud party, stated that the assistance plan was intended to strengthen security for the settlements, as well as to bolster small businesses and encourage tourism. Referring to the West Bank by its biblical names, Yariv Levin, the tourism minister, released a statement where he indicated that some of the money would provide financial support for the construction of hotels in the main tourism areas in Judea and Samaria. Keep in mind that most UN member countries view settlements and the construction of them as a violation of international law and a roadblock to a resolution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is Rick Rohde with your lowdown for June 20th, 2016.
Good friends, good evening and welcome here on this, I guess it's the second day of summer, first or second day of summer, 2016. That would be Tuesday, the 21st of June, 2016. It's time for INN World Report Radio now on the Great Logos Radio Network. My name is Tom Kiley. I've got the honor to bring this program to you on Tuesday nights as well as Thursday nights, and that's what we have here right now, and we've got a great show lined up for you tonight. We'll be joined in about 30 minutes by Wayne Madsen of Wayne Madsen Report. And I've asked Wayne to come on the show to talk about, generally speaking, to talk about the Orlando incident and the sort of surrounding information about it a little bit. And I also asked Scott Creighton to join us as well. He'll be coming on the top of the second hour. So he'll be on with us in about an hour, and Wayne Madsen will be joining us in about 30 minutes. And I'd like to have the two gentlemen on together for a while. Scott is an admirer of Wayne's and says that Wayne helped Scott Scott admired him so much that it inspired him to get involved with the alternative media himself. Scott running the great blog American Everyman. That's willieloman.wordpress.com. Wayne Madsen Report is that, waynemadsenreport.com. So those two gentlemen will be joining us this evening. In the meanwhile, the phone lines are open, 512-646-1984. So let's do that right now. Let's open the phone lines. And anything you would like to talk about? Let's see. Just checking in here. Anything you'd like to talk about? But like I said, I asked the two gentlemen to come on and talk about this situation in Orlando because it keeps evolving. And you're going to hear me say this at least one more time tonight, and maybe two more times because I may repeat myself when Scott joins us. But I thought I could give myself a break. I thought that I could just relax on this one, that maybe once in a while these things are not so phony baloney and not so staged, these events and so forth, and pre-planned. And I sort of allowed myself to just take it easy on this one. But sure enough, as the time goes on, there's more and more stinky details that keep emerging from this terrible, horrific shooting in Orlando. And, of course, typically the shooter is not around to tell any tales. Like what happened to the elder Tsarnaev brother in Boston. Unfortunately, for the cops and the FBI and the powers that be, it didn't happen to the younger one. Fortunately for him, I suppose. They tried to kill him really bad. They fired lots and lots of bullets into this boat that he was hiding in. But somehow he survived, so they had to deal with the situation and gave him a lousy lawyer, in my opinion, with a terrible defense. And so, he's in jail. Let's see what happens to him on appeal, perhaps. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, that's what happens. These guys don't usually stick around long enough to talk about it. And I started getting some information from various people that I know. There's a report that's rather unsubstantiated, so I didn't run with it with my group, that I send stuff out to. But it's interesting, nevertheless. This shooter, or I shouldn't say shooter, this crazy guy that they got in Los Angeles at about the same time that the Orlando event was happening. I think the guy's name is Holsworth or something like that. Young guy, 20 years old, looks like a real crackpot from Indiana. Looks like he's bisexual, at least, if not gay. And I don't know if you all heard this report or not, but in Santa Monica, California, I think on or about the day that the event happened in Orlando, this guy, the police responded to calls of a prowler or somebody knocking on windows and looking into apartments and stuff. And they met and they found this guy, this young man, this 20-year-old, who they arrested, or they searched his car and they found all kinds of assault rifles in there. Now, I don't know if they mean real assault rifles or the fake ones like the AR-15, which is a semi-automatic, but they found assault rifles in his car, pistols, ammunition, and the stuff that you could use to make a bomb with. And they took him into the Santa Monica Police Department. I believe the Santa Monica Police Department put a press release out about catching this guy and a tweet out and so forth. And the story goes that it was leaked from some Santa Monica police detectives that the guy claimed to be working with the shooter in Orlando, and they were on a team, and he was out in L.A. to do some damage at the Gay Pride Parade. But he got cold feet when he saw that they killed the shooter in Orlando, and he was afraid they were going to do the same to him. And he went to his contact in Los Angeles, and that guy's gone. So that's what he was doing, knocking on doors, trying to find this guy in the middle of the night. The FBI reportedly swooped in, picked the guy up, and told everybody in the Santa Monica Police Department that they weren't to talk about this to anyone. So I don't know how substantial this is, but it certainly fits. With a Gladio type of operation, especially a Gladio / MK Ultra type of operation. If you ask me, you get these patsies lined up. But then I saw reported in Telesur, which I believe is a Spanish American source from Florida, I believe, that another story that the shooter from Orlando, which we all have heard, even in the mainstream media, who was on the radar of the FBI. For some reason, they had a reason to cross paths with him and talk with him. And then it comes out that in 2013, the FBI actually tried to recruit him to work in a terror cell, allegedly as an informant, which that's the way these things go. Now, there are plenty of examples of the FBI recruiting people, typically people with a screw loose, people that are very easily manipulated, okay, and getting them to, talking it up, hyping it up with them, seeing if they'll take the bait and want to do a terror event. And in all of the cases that I've ever seen this happening in, they the terror event, the people weren't looking for this. The FBI was looking for them. And it typically starts off with the FBI getting somebody who's in a lot of trouble, somebody who's been caught dealing drugs or smuggling guns or something like that, especially if they're Islamic American or an Arab American. And then they say, look, we'll give you a chance to, escape prosecution if you start working with us. And then this hotshot will go to the mosques and he'll start talking it up and look for the impressionable people, sometimes people that are, mentally disabled. And, hey, why don't we do this? Hey, why don't we do that? There's plenty of examples of this, not just in this country, but also in Canada with the Toronto 18, those poor kids. And then what happens is they get a big terror plot going. And then at the last minute, the FBI swoops in, or the cops swoop in, and they break it up. And what do they break up? It happened here in New York City, up in Riverdale, they were going to attack a synagogue or something like that. It happened in Newburgh, New York, with the Newburgh 8, I think it's called. It's the same thing. These people don't have any money. They don't have any prospects. Somebody comes along, tries to recruit them. Hey, come on over to my house and we'll have a meeting and we'll plan this thing. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't come. Why not? Well, my car's, not working. I need it. Yeah, how much do you need to fix your car? I need a couple $100. All right, here's a couple $100. That kind of stuff. Nothing could have happened without the FBI pushing it. And then at the last minute, they swoop in and they break up the terror plot just as it's happening, but nobody has a real gun. There's no real bombs, none of that stuff. There's plenty of that, tons of that. And we've covered that over the years. Unfair Dealing, the great film by David Weingarten from Canada, going into great detail on how they do this. Up in Canada, the CSIS, which is their sort of FBI, was coming up for a vote in their parliament to cut back on all the money they gave them after 9/11. And all the parliamentarians, this is crazy. We don't need to spend this kind of money. So what happens? Right before the vote in parliament, they break up a terror plot in Toronto, where they were going to, these supposedly, Islamic Canadian kids were going to go into parliament and cut the parliamentarians' heads off and blow it up. And guess what happened? They all turned around. They all changed their vote. They all, oh, yeah, thank God. Oh, let's give them lots of money. Yet it turns out these kids were set up. They were framed. Some of them were not even mentally competent. And what happened? This is the guy, Abdul Sheikh, I think he calls himself. Now you see this creep who was the informer who set this off. You see him on TV. He's on Fox News as a former jihadi expert. This is the bum that set the whole thing up. And what did he do? He tells these kids, hey, come on, let's go have a fun weekend in the woods. Let's play paintball in the woods. I got a place we can go to. Yeah, really? Yeah, okay. Sure, all right, great. Kids, nobody has a real gun except for him. Paintball. They're going to play paintball in the woods, but don't forget, wear your camouflage. So these kids, these Arab Canadian kids, some of them got beards, and they're wearing camouflage. So this guy drives them up to the woods, to the place that, he's got a cabin up there or something. They're going to play paintball. And he stops in the middle of the woods. He stops at a farmhouse. Hey, I'm thirsty. Go knock on that door over there for me, will you? Get me a glass of water. Canadians are very polite. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you want some water? Yeah, hey, sure. Yeah. So these little Arab Canadian kids, Islamic Canadian kids with beards and camouflage knock on the door and say, excuse me, we're going up to the woods over here, to this training ground here where we're going to, and we just, my friend wants a glass of water. Can we, okay. That got turned into, they had a terrorist training camp in the woods that they would go to. And there's witnesses who saw them going there. Mom Pa Kettle owned the farm. Yes, we saw them. They were in camouflage. They stopped at our house and they asked us for water. They were on their way to their training ground, their terrorist camp in the woods. That's how this stuff works. So it's no surprise to me when I hear reports like this. But let's talk more about it when we get back. Tom Cowley, INN, right back after this.
You are listening to the Logos Radio Network. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
All right, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Cowley, INN World Report Radio. Listen, if you'd like to call in, that would be great. 512-646-1984. Phone lines are open. Wayne Madsen will be joining us in about 15 minutes. And then about half an hour after that, Scott Creighton from American Everyman will join us as well. I'd like to have the two of them on at the same time for a bit. And then probably we'll have Scott finish out the show with us. But talking about Orlando and the surrounding events and how, now it's more and more coming out. It looks like the FBI tried to get this guy, the shooter, Mateen or whatever his name is, from Orlando, involved in one of their many, many, many plots that they cook up, some of which they break up with a big, flurry of press attention right before they happen or as they're happening, allegedly happening, and some of which I think they just let go live. And the people involved think that they're part of a drill or something like that. And then they end up getting killed. They probably have professional people involved to do a lot of stuff. And then the patsies get killed. And, I can feel certain people recoiling from what I'm saying right now. I know that if we ever had mainstream media person on here, they would probably freak out by anybody talking like that. Knee-jerk reaction. Oh, conspiracy. But it's true. It's actually true. Our government has done this, and probably almost every government has done this for time immemorial, okay? This is just the way it goes. When it's not we the people. It's not the good people. It's the handful of crazy oligarchs at the top that want to do evil things to acquire more wealth and power and control and knock off other oligarchs. So they need us to go along with them in certain directions, especially when they want us to go to war. So there's all manner of things that are done to steer the public in that direction that they want you to go. And for anybody who has any doubt about what I'm talking about, it was proven, it was uncovered on a big scale happening in Europe in the 70s and 80s. Just go anywhere and look up Gladio. And especially, there's a great, great BBC film that they made on it, I think in 1992. Still on the web. I think I've downloaded it and saved it because who knows how long it's going to stay on the web. But there's a great, great BBC documentary that they made about Gladio. And they actually interview many of the people who were involved, the Italian fascists, former members of the CIA. And they took Italian fascists in Italy. Actually, these were secret organizations, illegal armies, underground paramilitary groups that they set up all across Europe that ended up actually killing European citizens and policemen and blaming it on communists because they didn't want the public being sympathetic to the communist parties in Europe. There's, every country, well, in Europe and here in the West has a communist, but we have a communist party here too. They're perfectly legal, but they have more sympathy in Europe. And they were concerned that these parties were getting too many votes, so they wanted to turn people against them. So they had many terrorist incidents, the Bologna train station probably being the worst one. Something like 85 people got killed, and hundreds were wounded, injured. And these were government operatives, CIA operatives, and it was all blamed on the communists. And, of course, the press will just do whatever they're told, so they had no problem blaming it on the communists. It was years later that it became clear, and there were some trials, and it all came out. So this absolutely happens, unfortunately, and that's why there's an alternative media to talk about this, because the mainstream media does not talk about it whatsoever. So because they're owned by the very same people. When you see stuff that doesn't make sense, when you see evidence being withheld from the American people, like what? Like the 28 pages from the 9/11 report that have been removed. Why, in God's name, does evidence about major crimes that took place in this country need to be kept from your eyes? And the many Congress people and senators who've looked at it said there's no reason for this. What about with this shooting in Orlando? Okay. They weren't going to let anybody hear or see the 911 transcript of this guy who allegedly called 911 and allegedly said, as he's killing everybody, God bless, I'm working with ISIS and all that stuff. Why? Why is he going with ISIS? Because he's a fundamentalist? Some fundamentalist, the guy is gay. The guy is gay. ISIS would be stoning him to death if he was over there. But yet, somehow, we get told, we don't have proof of it, but we were told. And the newspapers just go with it. Oh, he called 911 while he was shooting everybody. And he said, I'm doing this because of ISIS and you're bombing and killing people in my countries, or, where we all come from, right? Okay. I mean, in this case, the kid was born here, I think, but his father was from Afghanistan. And obviously, if this is all true, his father didn't do a very good job, did he? Of tolerance, if it's true. So, okay, so fine. So people want to hear this. Oh, you're not going to hear the tape. Really? Yeah. Evidence being withheld from the American people. You're not going to hear the tape. Really? There was such an uproar that they had to release a transcript. Why don't you just let us hear the guy's voice? If the guy said it, why don't you let us hear it? Or maybe it wasn't him. What's the problem here? Who works for who? Who's paying who? Pay my taxes? Who's working for who? So they release a transcript and they alter the transcript. Supposedly the guy says Allah. They changed it to God. I'd like to hear his voice. Because why? Because the government, our government, lies to us about these things. No question about it, Mr. Mainstream Media, six-figure salary talking head on the mainstream media. And you all help them. That's your job. They lie to us. And thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people die from these lies. What am I talking about? All right, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Big, fat lie. 1 million dead Iraqis. 4,000 or 5,000 dead U.S. servicemen and women. Billions, if not trillions of dollars spent going in to line the pockets of the military-industrial complex, going away from fixing this country, from the infrastructure in this country, creating a basket case out of a formerly fairly decently run, well-run, organized country named Iraq, where there was absolutely no Islamic terrorism because the guy who ran it, Saddam Hussein, wouldn't stand for it. And they didn't like him either, and he kept them out. That's a big fat lie. So don't anybody try to tell me, oh, Tom, what are you talking about? You don't believe the government? Yeah, they lie. And when they don't let me listen to the 911 tape, I want to know why. Are they lying? Did this guy even say what they said he said? All right, it's not 1 million people that got killed over this lie. It was 50-something in Orlando maybe. But I think we should assume it's a lie until proven otherwise. And now they're going so far, they're getting so freaked out about this that they're starting to, like Cass Sunstein, the husband of Samantha Power, who works with the Obama State Department, they want to start, they actually are starting to suggest mental hygiene laws if you don't believe the government. How about that? It's crazy. It's nuts how far. But why? I mean, why do all y'all just let this happen? I don't know. When did the American people turn into wimps and wet noodles and just let this crap happen? I don't know. Wayne Madsen will be joining us in a little bit. We're going to talk with Wayne about this and other developments. But I thought I could take a break. I thought, well, maybe this is one of those incidences where it was a copycat thing. It really happened. No, it's starting to come out. The clouds are bursting and it's all coming down. The FBI tried to run this guy in 2013 and he turned them down. I guess they came back and talked him into it. Which is it? Either they got back to him and they put him on board and he was involved in this thing, or they suspected him and they didn't follow through. I don't know. I got a bridge I could sell you right down the street here from where I am in Brooklyn. Tom Crowley, INN, right back with Wayne Madsen just after this.
Apple has spent a boatload to convince Americans to store data online, but the company's co-founder says cloud computing is dangerous. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, back to tell you about the black clouds over iClouds next.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
For a decade, Apple's been selling the public on cloud technology. The idea is for users to store their files online in the cloud for a fee rather than saving them on their local devices. But Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak opposes the whole idea. He warns of digital disaster if people store their contents in the iCloud. To quote him directly, the cloud computing trend is horrendous. He's right for two reasons. First, the minute you store stuff on an iCloud, you sign away ownership of that data to Apple. And second, walls can never be built high enough to keep hackers out of servers, not even those built in the clouds. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
You're listening to the Logos Radio Network at logosradionetwork.com.
Why are the proud descendants of pain?
friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. And as promised, we've got on the line with us Wayne Madsen of MadsenReport.com. Always a pleasure to speak with you, Wayne. Thanks for coming back on to INN.
Hi, Tom. Good to be with you.
Wayne, before we go any further, we've been dealing with each other, you and INN, for many years now, going way back from when we had a television show. And I must say, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. You're the consummate happy warrior, happy information warrior, I must say.
Well, I mean, that's what's interesting about covering the news is there's always some new angle, and it's especially this election year. I've not seen anything like it, and I've covered quite a few.
I'm with you there. This seems to be we're way out in left field on some of this stuff, or right field, or whatever field you want to call it. But that's true.
Exactly.
But the pyrotechnics are building up around the election as well with this attack now in Orlando. What was the guy's name? Mateen? What do they call this guy?
Omar Mateen. He had changed it from Siddiqui Mateen, and he changed it to Omar a few years back.
So, Wayne, whenever this kind of stuff happens, I think about you, especially you're down there in Florida. It's in your stomping grounds, this one, and there's always a lot more to these stories. What do you think of the key things that are coming out about this now that we're not totally clear in the beginning, at least? I know, for instance, his father looks like he was a CIA operative, no?
Yeah, well, that guy, his father set off alarm bells with me even before they were set off, with the shooter. I mean, here we got a guy who was claiming he was running an Afghan government in exile. He's expressed affinity for the Taliban, and he had on some photos he showed him wearing fatigues. He had a picture of Mohammed Daoud Khan, who was the guy who overthrew the Afghan king in 1973 and proclaimed Afghanistan a republic. There's a lot of connections going way back with the father, and then the fact that he apparently was part of this whole broadcast board of governors operation that runs Voice of America and hosts radio and TV Marti and all these other propaganda operations, include several that beam directly into Afghanistan and Pakistan, and which all were expanded under Hillary Clinton, I might add, because she was very upset when she saw RT and Al Jazeera and other networks, other foreign networks overseas, Chinese television, and she said, why don't we put out propaganda like that? I guess she didn't understand that the American networks have been pumping that out for years.
For years and years. Out of Munich, right? Was it Voice of America or Radio Free Europe or something?
No, Radio Free Europe, yeah. And not just Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, but the American Broadcasting Company, the National Broadcasting Company, the Columbia Broadcasting System, and Public Broadcasting System. They've all been pumping out government propaganda for years.
Oh, you mean National Pentagon Radio, NPR?
National Pentagon Radio. National Pentagon. Yeah, exactly. Or the Pentagon Broadcasting System.
Yeah, sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. We've been doing it forever. RT has the nerve, Press TV has the nerve to try to do it over here, and all of a sudden they act like, hey, it's not fair. What are you talking about? What are you people talking about? And then also that creep Banderas from the Ukraine. Didn't he work with them in Munich too?
Oh, the neo-Nazi Banderas and all of his what they used to call the Fourth Reich. I mean, the movie, The Odessa File, was about a reconstituted Fourth Reich, and there's a reason they picked, the city of Odessa in Ukraine, because there were so many neo-Nazis located in that area. Yeah. Especially when the Nazis went in there, they all came out of hiding and said, "Oh yeah, we hate the Russians and Stalin, and we're fellow travelers." So.
And the German high command created the Ukraine out of whole cloth in the first place during the First World War. Got them all ginned up for their nationalist aspirations, right?
Right. And now we got Victoria Nuland, who's a Zionist, I might add. And her husband, Robert Kagan, is one of the leading Zionist neocons who's now come out and endorsed Hillary, even though he claimed he was a Republican. We got Victoria Nuland, who's now being talked about as Hillary Clinton's Secretary of State. Along with Michelle Flournoy, who is a former Pentagon official, who's known as she's a warmonger. So we may have, in the Clinton administration, what are we going to have? Hillary as president, Elizabeth Warren as VP, Michelle Flournoy at the Pentagon, and Victoria Nuland at that State Department. Sounds like that's the team that we got to worry about World War III, about even more so than Donald Trump.
And they're talking about Donald Trump. Victoria Nuland, as you point out, she's a neocon. I think we have to change that term. It's fairly misleading, I think, Wayne. I want to ask you a question. Can you conceive of a single neocon who's not also a Zionist? I don't think they let you in that club. You have to be a Zionist first, correct?
Exactly, because even though you've had people like Rumsfeld, Cheney, and Jeb Bush sign on to the PNAC, which is kind of I call that the constitution for the neocons, the project for the new American century. But they're all, you look at their rhetoric, and they're all Zionists. I mean,
they are. I consider Cheney and Rumsfeld to be Zionists.
Yeah,
I consider the vice president to be a Zionist.
Yeah, Joe Biden, he even said so on a clip one time, being interviewed by Israeli television. You can see that on the.
Well, there's a reason. The reason I ask you, Wayne, is because wouldn't it be more accurate to refer to these people as Ziocons?
Yeah, and I know people use that. And the thing is Zionism is a political philosophy. Yes, it has a lot to do with commitment to either present-day Israel or even an expanded Israel. But nevertheless, it's a political movement, and people get all vexed when you say that person is pro-Zionist. But you could say in the 1940s or 50s that person is pro-communist, and you get a brass band would break out. You get confetti thrown at you on ticker tape on Wall Street if you said that, right? You said somebody's a pro-communist. That was aren't you a patriotic person for pointing that out? But if you say somebody's a pro-Zionist, both of them being political philosophies, you're looked at, you're some sort of crazy lunatic.
Well, yeah, it is an atheistic political movement formed by, generally speaking, atheistic people who identify as Jews. Now, that's hard to say because the term Jew itself or Jewish itself refers to a religion, and I've had rabbis on the show who say that it's got nothing to do with Zionism whatsoever. Yes,
and I've spoken to many rabbis who say that, this whole issue about now we've got the Zionists are saying anyone who supports the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, should be boycotted, sanctioned, and divested themselves. And there's one group in Europe that's recently surfaced that says that BDS supporters should be executed. Now. That's terrorism. That's not
ISIS talking either. But, you raised the point. Victoria Nuland, who is a Ziocon,
right?
She is the one who resurrected the neo-Nazis in the Ukraine. So what's that all about?
Exactly.
What are Zionists?
Exactly.
And I bet Victoria Nuland identifies herself as being Jewish, although she's clearly not very religious at all. What is this? How if you or I tried to resurrect the Nazis to shine somebody's shoes, Netanyahu would be screaming about it. But they're silent about that, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And when you look at this, then you see a lot.
Well, hold on, Wayne, because we've got to go on break. We'll be right back.
Easy.
Back, everyone. Tom Kiley here, INN World Report Radio, every Tuesday and Thursday night here on the Great Logos Radio Network, speaking with Wayne Madsen of WayneMadsenReport.com, a great website to go to. Wayne has just done incredible work over the years. I love the research. Wayne, you're a great researcher. So many things I could pick. How about the background to Obama's family? And I mean, if that's not CIA, I don't know what is. His mother and probably even his father and maybe even his grandmother, right?
Well, that's and that's in the news right now because as we know, Obama is really threatening China. This pivot to Asia, he's now sending 2 aircraft carriers, the Stennis and the Reagan, over to the Chinese waters. He's doing all these military deals, including maybe selling arms to Vietnam. Like there's not enough unexploded U.S. ordnance there to begin with, to sell them more advanced weapons. The U.S. Navy may be back in Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam soon, where the U.S. Navy is back in Subic Bay in the Philippines. He's selling weapons to Taiwan. In other words, he's doing everything to lay down the gauntlet of the Chinese. One country, though, that has not been part of his operation is his old country, Indonesia, where he grew up as a kid, and the country of his stepfather, Lolo Soetoro. Indonesia has not been part of this, but recently there's been naval clashes between Chinese fishing boats and Coast Guard vessels and Indonesian Navy vessels in the very southern part of the South China Sea over not over islands, but over fishing territory, maritime. And at the same time, there is a move in the Indonesian government to take a look at the 1965 coup, which Obama's stepfather participated in and overthrew President Sukarno. And in 1967, his mother went down there to work for USAID, really CIA, in central Javanese villages to basically turn over lists of communists or perceived communists or actual communists. And then that was turned over to the CIA, and this is where the Indonesian army got their information and went out and executed people. Anywhere from 900,000 to 1 million ethnic Chinese and communists and suspected communists were executed. This is the real background of Obama's family. And now Obama he doesn't want this re-examination of the 1965 coup because, you know what might come out, the role of his stepfather and mommy in that. And so all of a sudden what's happening is extreme Islamist groups are protesting this attempt to have this commission look at the 65 coup. The same Muslim jihadists who participated in the jihad against the Chinese and the communists in the execution. Today, these are all Saudi funded in Indonesia, and it serves the purpose of keeping Obama's families, their involvement in the 65 genocide under wraps. So here again, we have another coalescing of Obama with the jihadists. To stand up, he's got a jihadist as the CIA director, Sheikh John Al-Haj Brennan, But,
yeah, somebody's got some pictures on him with little kids or something.
They talked about Jihadi John, the guy that was cutting heads off over there, the British guy. The real Jihadi John is the director of the CIA, Brennan.
Yeah. They must really have something on that guy. I don't know. He seems like he's very sympathetic to us.
He got very used to the sound when he was CIA station chief. They probably delivered a few young boys to him, and he says, as a kid that went through Catholic grade school, high school, and Fordham Catholic University, probably said, "Hey, this is almost like Catholic school."
Like being back with the crooked priests.
Yeah. So he's now, he's with the crooked imams and the Saudi royals.
Yeah. Not the good priests, all right? Not the good priests.
There's a few of them.
There's some of them, but the crooked ones. So tell me, since we're talking about this, Obama doesn't impress me as having any particular intellect that would be able to deal with whether or not we should go to war with China or not. This doesn't seem to be an original thought, in my estimation, of his. Where's he getting this from?
Yeah, but look at you got to look at the background. His stepfather, Lolo, was absolutely part of this operation that killed, hundreds of thousands of ethnic Chinese in Indonesia, and that wiped out, entire families. And these were mostly shopkeepers. These were not agents, as the CIA tried to say, agents of Mao Zedong and Red China. Anyone who's been to Asia knows that ethnic Chinese they're interested in something. Making money. They're very good business people, right? And they're not
making money.
I mean, communism and shopkeepers, private shopkeepers, doesn't even go along. So, but anyway, when they got the Muslim population, which is 90% of Indonesia, to go with this, so they had a ready-made lynch mob, and his stepfather was part of it. The same guy who made Obama an Indonesian citizen, got him enrolled in a state school where he prayed to Mecca at least twice a day. In the madrasa, which I stood in Jakarta, the very madrasa where I used to pray as a child. It's not hard to see Obama, pick up that jihadist attitude and say, let's go after the Chinese. And in this case, Obama's a lunatic. He wants to go after Russia and China at the same time.
Yeah.
And this idea. I know Trump brought up Hillary Clinton's religion today, some appearance. He spoke to some evangelicals in New York City. But the real question is, what is Obama? There's a lot of indications his mother became very active in the Subud movement, which was a sort of it's a little bit of Islam, a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of mystical Javanese animism. But probably a CIA mind control cult, like all of them. But we don't know what he believes. I mean, to me, Trinity United Church of Christ in South Chicago was anything but a very religious institution.
It's crazy. You know, and you've got, you know, I just saw Biden mouthing off the other day, you know, that Trump likes Putin and Putin is, you know, the Russian belligerents again now and all this. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Biden's other son, the one, you know, I mean, the one who was Attorney General of Delaware died, but the other one, Hunter Biden, is involved with this Ukrainian anti-Russian oligarch and Zionist named Igor Kolomoisky. He's a business partner of his, right? So what do you expect Biden to say, right? His whole family is involved in the Ukrainian Zionist/neo-Nazi government in Kiev.
Well, again, how do you get the Zionists and the neo-Nazis in bed together? This is amazing to me. I mean, how can they stand each other?
They were always together. In 1930s, Hitler and the Zionists made a deal called the Transfer Agreement. In return for money, the Zionists paid Hitler quite a lot of money, and then he allowed a certain number of German Jews to emigrate to Palestine, which was then a British mandate. He had no problem with that because he figured eventually, when the German army got to Palestine, these people could be used as a fifth column to go after the British mandate authorities. Yeah. So they've always been together. As a matter of fact, there was a coin minted by the Nazi central bank honoring the transfer agreement of 1933.
Yeah, the swastika on one side and the Star of David on the other.
The Magen David on the other, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot to that lousy story. You know, Roosevelt wanted to take in Jewish refugees from Europe, you know, during the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And Zionists in the State Department prevented it from happening because they wanted to steer them to Palestine instead.
Palestine, exactly. That was the goal. Yeah. The goal was. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you know, people like Roosevelt and his administration get branded as being insensitive and not willing to help the Jews from during the Holocaust, when actually it's quite the opposite. They kept trying to let some come over here, and they couldn't do it. But they gave up finally.
I think Zionism should be viewed from the lens of it's a right-wing fascist movement, and it just so happens that, you know, the panache or the chateau over it is Judaism. But as you said before, Zionism itself is not a religious movement. It's a nationalistic fascist movement.
And it's actually against Judaism and all other religions as well. The rabbis consider it an abomination because, you know, they're trying to use religion to fool people into justifying what they do. You know, God's supposed to recreate Israel, and the rabbis say, no, this is the ultimate blasphemy. God doesn't need any help. They're trying to replace God with themselves.
You get the Christian Zionists like John Hagee, you know, this guy down in Texas. Yeah. And basically that's what that's all about. You know, it's you know, the carrying out of the prophecy and revelation, all this mumbo jumbo.
As if God, you know, needed help from anybody to do anything like that.
Well, if he ever needed help, I think the last person he'd try to get help from is John Hagee. Yeah. You know, I mean, John Hagee is like he's just a charlatan.
Well, you know, as I say, religion is the last refuge of the ego, and this guy's got plenty of both. So, listen, friends, that music means we're coming up on the break. We're going to take a break. We've been speaking with Wayne Madsen from MadsenReport.com. I hope you go there already. If you don't, please do. And then on the other side, we're going to be joined, the three of us. There'll be three of us with the great Scott Creighton from American Everyman, also in Tampa. So we'll be right back with Scott and Wayne just after this. Okay, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiley here, INN World Report Radio. Now, we've been speaking with Wayne Madsen from MadsenReport.com, and as promised, now we're joined by Scott Creighton from American Everyman, and you get there by going to willieloman.wordpress.com. And I've got the pleasure of introducing these two gentlemen. They're from not very far apart in Florida, and always a pleasure to connect some of my alternative media friends. Gentlemen, welcome both to INN World Report.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Scott, I asked you both on, actually, and Wayne too, to talk about this Orlando stuff because, developments keep coming out. Some of them are a little bit sketchy. I talked earlier about what was this kid's name that they got in California? Holsworth or Wadsworth?
Holsworth or something like that. The one who they say now confessed, or somebody said he confessed that the CIA sent him up and he was afraid and he was turning himself in because he didn't want the CIA to whack him like they did Omar Mateen. That guy?
Yeah. And that's even a sketchy report. I don't know how you're going to verify that, but so anyway, so I'm not going that too far with that. However, now we see, gentlemen, that they're saying that the FBI tried to, bring this guy Mateen in to one of their many plots that they cook up with, gullible Islamic Americans. What about that?
Here's an interesting point of that story. One of the reasons I'm guessing that you don't really want to harp too much on the story out of California is because it goes to a journalist for a website, writing for a website, but it's completely anonymous. Now here's the flip side of that. The story about the FBI trying to lure the Orlando shooting into a terror plot in 2013, that story is actually supported by the naming of the informant who came out, not an informant, but the whistleblower who came out was Sheriff Ken Mascara of Florida St. Lucie County, Vero Beach Sheriff's Department. That individual came forward and said that the FBI dispatched an informant to lure Omar into some kind of act, but he didn't bite. So there's a stark difference in those stories. So I tend to err on the side where I know there's a reliable source, or at least a named source in the story.
Wayne, does that comport with your understanding of the situation?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more. There's a story about Mateen being approached to be an FBI informant, and he smelled a rat and turned him down. And then they said he was involved with this. Imam who had been in the Marine Corps, and he has some mosque up in Orlando, and he was a member of that mosque. And that guy has come out and said, "Yeah, he's verified the fact that we were both approached by the FBI, and in the case of the Imam, he says that the FBI said, we want to send you to West Africa so you can kill some Americans." So he didn't bite on that one.
Now, hold on. Do they know that it's the FBI that's trying to set him up for this?
No, I don't think he knew at that point in time. It was, he was trying to set it, but he figured it out later. It was the same bunch apparently that had approached his buddy Omar Mateen, to get him involved in some sort of operation. So,
now, gentlemen, the FBI has done this, and not just here. In Canada, CSIS does it too. They get these gullible people. Many times they're not mentally stable, and they go, "Oh, let's go do this and let's go do that," and they wind people up. One thing that they do with these people is that they provide them with an entire plot with all kinds of would-be weapons, which turn out to be duds and everything. And then at the last minute, they swoop in and bust these guys right in the act. Like has happened here in New York at the synagogue up in Riverdale and the Newburgh and all the rest of it. And then another modus operandi seems to be, something, they wind these people up in their patsies and then they get killed in something like the Sarnaroff brothers, for instance. What about those two methods, modus operandi? What do you say about that?
Well, I think it's a given that this is part of what they do. I mean, I think just maybe a month ago, there was a report on just how much money and how many different operations and how many different quote unquote suspects the FBI was currently working at the time, and it was some ungodly number, like 1,000 or something. It was huge, and this has been covered even by the mainstream media. How many years ago the judge, what's his name, from Fox News did a special showing, all 17 plots that the FBI has patted themselves on the back for foiling since 9/11 were actually created by the FBI so they could foil them. You got Mother Jones has covered this, Salon has covered this, even Glenn Greenwald has covered this. The Washington Post has covered it. There's no question that the FBI is actually manufacturing these plots. The real question is, how many of them do they allow to go live? And that's a good question. And more importantly, why do they let them go live? Do they let them go live? Does someone kind of double cross them in the middle of it? I don't know. My guess is that they let them go live because they need. Sometimes they need a body count for. Honestly, sometimes you need a body count to get certain things done. You need a major crisis to get certain things done in the country that aren't normally going to be done without some major threat or terror.
I think the most quintessential FBI setup where they allowed it to happen is the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, where they had informants sitting next to Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, the blind sheikh. They were getting everything. Actually, he was not even guilty of any of this, but they knew they were going to rent this van, and there's some question as to whether the FBI staged that whole operation.
Well, their informant complained, "Hey, wait a minute, what are you giving me real blasting caps for?" If this is
So
the Egyptian,
the bomb
maker. 93 World Trade Center bombing should have been a red light or red flag for what happened on 9/11, because they had tried it before, and in the same place. And they always say, criminals, they like to go back to the scene of the crime. Well, here's a real example of that. It just took a few years in between, but.
Gentlemen, I'd like to share with you as somebody who worked in the World Trade Center, who serviced Cantor Fitzgerald up on the 103rd, 4th, 5th floors, who almost got killed that day myself, who lost co-workers that day. I didn't work there directly. I was a contractor with them. Let me offer you my theory here. I think, well, first of all, it's very important to note that both attacks on the World Trade Center happened relatively early. In the case of Clinton, extremely early in their terms, right, as president.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. I think that the 93 attack was all teed up and ready to go in anticipation of an H.W. Bush presidency, a second term. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a stretch because it happened, a few days into Clinton's presidency. But right. So I think it was all, just like the Bay of Pigs was all teed up and ready to go in what they thought was going to be the beginning phase of a Nixon presidency. So too, I think the 93. Yeah. Now, why in the beginning of a president's term? So that your guy can take full advantage and has plenty of time, at least 4 years or most of 4 years, to get the subsequent job done. To go to war with the right country and all that sort of thing. So when HW lost, they had the plan ready to go. I think they probably said, you know what, let's let it go forward because we're just going to set the stage. It's the appetizer for the big show. Then that'll come later on. We'll do it again. Does that make any sense, gentlemen?
Oh, I think so. We know that, and then, so we had the 1993 attempt to wipe out the Trade Center, and then in 1995, we had the Oklahoma City bombing, which immediately, you go back and look at the news coverage of that, your Wolf Blitzers and all were just eager to say, oh, this is Arab terrorism. And then he found out it was an ex-military guy, supposedly, that was involved, McVeigh. But even with Oklahoma City, they couldn't get, the Justice Department couldn't get all of its wish list stuff in place. That happened with the Patriot Act after 9/11.
That's an important distinction. I mean, it's so that they get it done early into the administration because they anticipate another 8 years or at least 4 years to complete their tasks or at least move us closer to where they want us to be. But let's not forget, like Wayne was alluding to a minute ago, the project for the New American Century isn't just about the Middle East. The ideology and installing a certain ideology like the Patriot Act, like the USA Freedom Act, like the new CISPA that's been passed recently by the Obama administration, because you have to remember, the Obama administration is a continuation not just of the Clinton administration before, which brought us the 93 attack, but also the Bush administration. There were a lot of Bush appointees who remained in place when Obama first took office for the first 2 years.
Including his Secretary of Defense.
Right. So, I mean, when he went back and finally got another Secretary of Defense after the woman that Mr. Madsen just talked about and before I came on refused to do it, who did he get? He went and got Ashton Carter, who is a pure Zionist neocon. So it just the big project here, and I think, you guys were talking about the lists that were being created in Indonesia and fascism. And I think that's right before I came on. And I think that's a good tie in here because I think that directly brings us right back to this Omar Martin situation. But yeah, I mean, to me, it takes place early in the administration, which might give us pause to be concerned about 2017. But they happen in the beginning of an administration because there is an agenda that they want to see fulfilled. And it's not necessarily the agenda in the Middle East, but right here at home.
Wayne?
No, I agree. I mean, I think when you look at certainly, there was there was a lot of angst when Obama first came in. He kept all the Bush U.S. attorneys in place. Well, most of them, resigned immediately, but he kept many of them, including some of the ones who were involved in political prosecutions under George W. Bush.
The one that prosecuted Don Siegelman in Alabama.
Don Siegelman was kept in place, right? That prosecutor was kept in place. And so you got to wonder, I remember in the 2008 campaign where I got into heated discussions with friends of mine who were very, very high up in the Democratic Party infrastructure who were supporting Hillary because what they kept saying to me, you do not know who this guy Obama is. And I said, yeah, I know. He's, this guy out of Chicago.
He's a community organizer. We got to take a break. We'll be right back with Wayne Madsen and Scott Creighton just after this.
This is the Logos Radio Network.
All right, good friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. Generals and Majors, that's what we got here on the show tonight. We've got a couple of great alternative media luminaries here. Scott Creighton from American Everyman, that's willieloman.wordpress.com, and the great Wayne Madsen from MadsenReport.com. Gentlemen, it just goes all over the place. Somehow we started off with Orlando, and now we're getting back into presidential politics and major-scale false flag operations. Let me throw a change up here real quick. What about the entire infrastructure? They keep going back to the same playbook over and over and over again. Americans are, and the generally speaking, Western Europeans, I suppose, and probably South America got over this a long time ago. They become more and more and more skeptical of their politicians. Now the media as well. How much longer do you think they can keep getting away with this? And B, the proverbial whistleblowers from the inside. When are the white knights? And Wayne, you know more about this probably than any of us because you've got so many contacts in the security services and so forth. When is it possible that there's some kind of a struggle going on inside the Pentagon? Those who don't want to see us get entangled with the Syrian situation and that sort of thing. When are people going to speak up about these false flags? What do you gentlemen think?
Well, to the contrary, we have these 50 people in the State Department who just sent this memo. We don't know who they are, but I can assume that they're people like Victoria Nuland's name is on that list, who don't think that we're doing enough to fight Assad in Syria. And they're talking about, and then Kerry praises that, like, oh, this is what that shows a tradition of not agreeing. Like he's back wearing the fatigues, and throwing his medals over the fence at the White House. But the fact that Kerry is kind of pushing them along and saying, I find that these people are saying we don't agree with the Obama administration's policy on Syria, and they're foreign service people. There may be a few political appointees in there, but to me that's treasonous. And Kerry seems to be going along with it, and that tells me that Kerry is probably using these people, or he knows who they are, as a wedge to put pressure on Obama to allow the U.S. military to go in there and start bombing Assad's forces in Syria, which will put us in a conflict immediately with the Russians. And, that seems to be what Kerry is in favor of.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, this new list of 50-51 State Department, she's on it, Nuland's on it. I've also read that Robert Ford, Mr. Regime Change U.S. ambassador who was sent over there, who really started this whole thing off. I've heard that he is on it. I think that it's timed. It's not a coincidence that we're starting to really hear. You mentioned Michelle Flournoy as the probable new Secretary of Defense for Hillary Clinton. Well, of course, what is her position on the whole thing? Her position on the whole thing is we need to use what she calls limited military coercion to help remove Assad from power, basically by setting up a no-bombing zone so that Assad can't defend the people of Syria from our moderate terrorists that we sent over there. And if they do, then according to Flournoy, what we need to do is start bombing not only Syrian military targets, but also civilian Syrian government targets. And hopefully, I guess, try to avoid hitting any Russians or Iranians while we're doing that. But basically, just start bombing Syria and back into the Stone Ages so we can take over again.
You know what, gentlemen? You mentioned a name there just to show everybody how far gone the situation is nowadays. I'm here in Brooklyn. On the weekends, there's always kids out on the street trying to get you to donate and sign this and that. And every few weeks, it's Amnesty International, you know. And I try to tell them. You mentioned Robert Ford, right? The death squad guy, the protege of John Negroponte, right? He was the freaking keynote speaker for Amnesty International in Denver. On March 30th and April 1st, 2012, Robert freaking Ford, keynote speaker for Amnesty International. What do you say about that, Wayne?
I used to work with Amnesty International. They had a great group that looked at mercenaries and, how they, groups that would arm mercenaries and mostly developing countries. And they got rid of that group. It was a great group I worked with. And Human Rights Watch, which I did work for in the 90s. They both have been basically bought by George Soros now. Soros bought Human Rights Watch for a $100 million donation. Now he runs it, and he made similar donations to Amnesty International. He effectively runs that too. So these NGOs are nothing more than now extensions of the U.S. government. They're no different than the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is another CIA cipher. And it's just a shame to see those organizations that I used to have some respect for go down. They basically sold themselves to Soros. And Soros, he exists to do this type of thing. He throws his money around. He buys influence, buys political parties. He buys politicians. He buys themed revolutions, which is now happening, unfortunately, in Macedonia. Another one of these color revolutions is happening as I speak. And it goes back to Soros. And let's say Soros he's got a lot of money, but he's only a front man for the Rothschild family. And that's his whole background. He's basically the public face of them.
Yeah, you said that, an extension of U.S. foreign policy, but, the U.S. government is an extension of people like Soros, who's an extension of the real power, right?
Yeah, it all goes full circle eventually. I've just been working on a book that should be out in August. It's basically a dictionary of CIA front companies, proprietaries, contractors over the years, since OSS days. And I actually surprised myself by finding out how so many of them there have been, that there still are. And, here we have the CIA that was dealing with Walt Disney the same time it was dealing with the Hells Angels. You got a problem with an organization like this.
Well, the number 15 comes to mind. I don't know if it's 15,000 or 1,500, but I remember years ago somebody claiming that the CIA owned and operated 15,000 so-called legitimate businesses that people knew of.
Yeah, I didn't get that many. I'd love to see that list. I'm up to a book now of 219 pages of fronts, but I'd love to see 15,000.
Maybe it was 1,500. I don't know. I remember the number 15 though, and 1,000 somewhere.
15,000 is probably more like it, because a lot of them were just they were on the shelf. We never read about them. Because they never were activated, but they were there in case they had to be used.
Yeah. Well, after 9/11 and the leash was taken off, it might be up to 15,000 by now. I mean, they got money dumped all over them, and they were just allowed to do whatever they wanted.
And even before you see the use of these operations, they come in waves. You had the Bay of Pigs invasion. There was a whole bunch of them, especially here in Florida, front companies and whatnot. And then you had the JFK assassination a couple of years later, and the more front companies. And then you had the Vietnam War, all these other, Air America and all their spinoffs and subsidiaries. You get into Watergate. There's all a bunch of. I mean, it's continual into Iran-Contra and
BCCI.
BCCI, Enron, all operations involving CIA money laundering. Alan Stanford down in Antigua, and it's
Nugan Hand. It's international.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What was the company that Valerie Plame worked for?
Brewster Jennings, and that was a very small operation.
Right.
And ostensibly they were doing some good things. I mean, most of these CIA fronts were money laundering and for drug smuggling. As Gary Webb, my old colleague Gary Webb, wrote about. Probably was killed over.
Remember the Man from U.N.C.L.E.? Speaking of laundering in front companies, remember the Man from U.N.C.L.E.? They used to walk into their headquarters through a Chinese laundry shop. Do you remember that?
Yes. NSA had a facility up in College Park, Maryland that was behind a dry cleaning place.
That's so funny. The guy used to press a shirt and the door would open and they'd walk in. All right, we'll be right back with these two gentlemen right after this.
Here in the U.S., a man's home used to be his castle. You'd need permission to enter or a compelling reason to break in, like a search warrant. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, and I'll be back in just a moment to tell you how things have changed.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This public service announcement is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
Police are irresistible, according to the Indiana Supreme Court. It recently ruled that citizens in that state cannot resist police entry to their homes, even when the entry is illegal. The decision stems from a case where a man was stun-gunned and arrested after trying to bar the police from his apartment. Justice Stephen David explained the majority decision, claiming citizen resistance is against public policy and is incompatible with modern Fourth Amendment jurisprudence. The Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees citizens the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. Seems to me it's the Indiana Supreme Court that's incompatible with the Fourth Amendment. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht. More news and information at CatherineAlbrecht.com.
Live Free Speech Radio, LogosRadioNetwork.com.
Something wrong! Man, I swear something's wrong. Something's wrong! I don't think I'll be around here long.
Good friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. A good conversation here with two luminaries in the alternative media fundament, in my opinion. A guy who's been at it for some time and a guy who's been at it not quite as long, but they both do a very powerful job. I'm talking about Wayne Madsen from WayneMadsenReport.com and Scott Creighton from American Everyman, WillieLoman.wordpress.com. Gentlemen, I put forth before the break, what do you think? When are we going to see some white knights blowing whistles? When are we going to? Is there a struggle going on within the system? Wayne, you raised the point that these 50 impudent, perhaps treasonous State Department officials are towing the Zionist line, the Ziocon line. I'm not impressed with that, though. That's an act of desperation, I think. What about, are there patriotic Americans that are getting fed up with all of this stuff that work in the system?
I think there's a lot of people getting fed up. I don't think Donald Trump would be where he is today if people weren't fed up.
Yeah.
But as far as people in the administration are concerned, look, this is it. They've only got a half a year left, really, and they're basically all looking for employment now. The political appointees are. So I would doubt very seriously whether we'd see anybody jeopardizing their chances to find post administration employment by blowing a whistle on something. And then you've got to also look at the fact that the Obama administration has been the worst administration in history in going after whistleblowers. The 9 prosecutions under the 1917 Espionage Act, more than all of his predecessors put together, the use of that arcane act. Years ago, when I was still in D.C., up until 2012, my sources were drying up because people were petrified of being identified, talking to me. And the same thing happened to the AP because their phones were being tapped. And we know that the email and all, the AP was under surveillance. And so everybody, it was a real chill that set into the Washington press corps.
Well, speaking of phones being tapped and information, what about this ridiculous story that we saw come and practically go so quickly last week about the so-called Russians hacking into the DNC to get the dirt on Trump and Hillary? What a joke. I mean, remember when we were spying on all the UN diplomats with their cell phones in the lead up to the war in Iraq? What about that, guys?
Well, that was just a cover for the Guccifer 2. They knew that they had been the company that handles the DNC's websites or security knew that somebody had gotten in, so they just decided to toss out there that the Russians did it. But it wasn't the Russians. I found out later Guccifer 2 released some information. He's the one who actually released not just the stuff on Donald Trump, but also the stuff showing that the DNC has been backing Hillary and pushing for Hillary ever since this entire primary process started. So I think there was kind of using the Russians to cover up for that. But I think to Wayne's earlier point, where you're talking about a real chilling effect that's taking place and that's been taking place in certain sectors of the alternative community, you got that everywhere. And I wanted to ask Wayne, since he's here and since we're talking, what he thinks about the two pieces of legislation that just failed in the Senate, specifically the Feinstein Amendment that would have allowed for the FBI, and not only the FBI's terror watch list, but also other lists that the FBI and other Department of Justice organizations or groups put together, denying people various constitutional rights. What kind, and tie that back into the Omar Mateen event that just took place, a very questionable Omar Mateen event that just took place. I'm kind of curious what Wayne sees taking shape in the next maybe 6 months. If we look at these presidential terms in office, do you see them trying to complete something, an agenda that they have on their minds between now and when Obama leaves office? And with that, I mean like the fomenting the idea that they can put these secret lists together, and these secret lists will actually have an effect on people's constitutional rights.
Yeah, if it happens, it will happen before Obama leaves office, but it will also happen after the election. So he doesn't have, it's the lame duck. We have to look at everything now. There may be an attempt to rush a lot of things through during the lame duck, the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership among them, which is not very popular right now, especially with Republicans, because of Trump and it's a Garland nomination to the Supreme Court. That may happen in the lame duck if it happens. So this may be one lame duck session of Congress that really needs to pay close attention to, because what I'm hearing is that because of the situation with Ryan and Trump and McConnell, that there might be an effort by, believe it or not, the Republicans and the Democrats may come together during the lame duck to get a lot of things passed.
Well, that's pretty ominous, I think. What about?
That's regardless of who wins, whether it's Hillary or Trump. This will happen in any case.
If Trump wins, I'm anticipating that he will be mousetrapped, the term that Ray McGovern likes to use, where I could anticipate a situation where the powers that be that fought so hard to keep him out of the White House will say, okay, smart ass, you think you're so funny. All right, bang. They do a major 9/11 type of thing, and it's like leaving plenty of red herrings and smoking guns around that point at somebody they want to get rid of. And they're going to say, what are you going to do about that now? Now, either that or, if you believe people like Webster Tarpley, he's in on all of this, and they're going to serve it up to him on a plate so he can go become the next Hitler of the whole world. What do you think about those two extremes, gentlemen? Scott?
I think that it's possible. I don't see Trump as being all that different. They say, well, at least the one thing that he won't do is pass the TPP. He's never said he's not going to do the TPP. He said he's going to make it better. He never said he's not going to pass the TTIP. He said he's going to make it better. The man's a pure neoliberal. He boasts about it. He boasts about taking advantage of lax laws and lax regulation in order to make money. I don't think he's all that different than Hillary Clinton, except for the fact that Hillary Clinton has the machine behind her. Hillary Clinton has the Clinton Globalist Initiative. She has the history. She has Bill Clinton. She has the entire DNC. And she really does have the neocons. She's not really a liberal, folks. She's not even really a Democrat. She's a Scoop Jackson Democrat. She's a far right.
She's a Zyocon.
She's a Zyocon.
And she's got the blood on her hands, too.
And she is crazy.
She was a Goldwater girl.
She was a Goldwater girl.
Right. So I don't really think there's that big of a difference. Here's my thing. My thing is, I just wonder if we talked about this before. How do you get Bush elected? You pick people who deliberately are going to throw the election. How do you get Obama elected? You get Trump. You get McCain. You get Romney. and at those particular times they were really hated. Well, how do you go and get somebody who is as unpopular as Hillary Clinton elected? Well, you get a crazy guy who everyone thinks is going to be the next Hitler, and you have him go out there and say crazy things. What has he done this month in order to prepare and run this campaign? He's done absolutely nothing. Hillary Clinton has spent $20 million in the June buyout.
He just got rid of his campaign manager. Right. He got rid of Lewandowski, which is, I think, a good thing.
Which was working for him up until this point. He's dumped him and gotten rid of him. I don't believe the guy wants to be president, but even if he doesn't and they still elect him, because nobody's going to want to vote for Hillary Clinton, believe me that, even if he does end up becoming president, I don't think he's going to be all that different than Hillary Clinton.
Well, before, Wayne, you take a bite out of that apple, we're going to take a break. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that on the other side. Hey, you think all of this stuff that he's not afraid of Putin, he thinks Putin's doing a good job as bluster? That'll be interesting. We just talked about Obama and Hillary trying to start World War III.
Easy.
All right, good friends, welcome back. Coming down the home stretch, I hope you've enjoyed this program. It has certainly been very interesting, too, of my great sources for information that I rely on consistently. A lot of the things you hear me talking about, I've had taken advantage of the research that both of these gentlemen have done. I'm talking about Wayne Madsen from WayneMadsenReport.com, and I'm also talking about Scott Creighton from American Everyman. That's willieloman.wordpress.com. And I was just asking some questions about, a possible Trump presidency, the possible use of a false flag early on, as we see they typically happen in a new presidency for a Donald Trump. Wayne, what do you think? I mean, how do you think he would react to A, B? Is it a viable concept to try to either mousetrap him, force a new President Trump into a neocon direction, even if he didn't want to go there, or maybe he really does want to go there and they'd be just teeing it up for him? What do you think?
Well, I think it all depends on who he's going to have as his, in national security positions and in senior roles in his cabinet. A couple of months ago, he had a news conference in Washington where he rolled out some of his advisors, and it was like, in many cases, like who? And in others, it was, Walid Faris, who is probably one of the worst people he could pick. Walid Faris is a Lebanese phalangist who was tied in with the, pro-Israeli right wing in Lebanon in the 80s. And, I know people in D.C. that saw Faris there. He's a neocon. And they said, oh, my God, what is Trump thinking? This is the worst possible person. So, if he's surrounded by people like that, we could have some real difficulties.
Is it true that he relies on Larry Kudlow for economic advice? Because that's not a good sign.
Crackhead Kudlow in the 80s.
I know that he gave his famed security speech, the one that he came out, and the first one he did where he actually used the teleprompters. When I wrote about that, I was intrigued because it wasn't one of his big events. He gave it at a little press conference hearing area in front of a invitation only audience. It was at a neocon institution. It was at a neoconservative institution closely tied with the PNAC. Not only that, but the guy who introduced him, wasn't he like Curveball or something from the Iraq War or something? He was the Afghani neocon who was part of the PNAC group.
Was he the father of this Mateen guy, maybe?
Something like that. But it was this guy was well known. He was well understood to be part of the Project for the New American Century. He was actually a person who signed on that letter.
Yeah, I don't think Trump understands who these various individuals are and the alliances, the allegiances, and the biases. He wants to have some names up there. He got some names. Walid Faris was one of the worst. I had to start thinking, man, if we get Faris in there, this guy's got blood on his hands. The Sabra and Shatila massacre was carried out by people that were with him, his group. Yeah.
While the Israelis who were in charge of the area because they had occupied it militarily just looked the other way, and that was what's his name? That was Ariel Sharon, right?
Yeah, that was Sharon. They helped facilitate it, of course.
Yeah. And they just looked the other way while the killing went on for days in those camps, so terrible. Yeah, I don't know. And then isn't there a couple of, who's he got? Doesn't he got some retired general that's pretty good working for him, Trump, and advising him? Or is it an admiral?
There may be a couple that broke with the Bush administration on various issues, and I know Obama too.
Wait, is he still saying that he's considering Newt Gingrich as a vice presidential candidate?
I don't know that he ever said it. It was implied.
Bill O'Reilly is pushing that, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
It's implied. I don't know if he ever said it.
Because Gingrich came out about 3 days ago in the wake of this Omar Mateen thing and was complaining that people were worried about these no-fly lists being used to take away people's constitutional rights. And he was saying, look, we got to bring back McCarthyism, basically. And he was praising McCarthyism. So, I mean, I don't think Gingrich would be a good selection for him.
I think McCarthyism would be just what the doctor ordered right now, to root out traitors in the American government. We're littered with them right now. Whereas when McCarthy was there, apparently there weren't any real ones, because they never successfully prosecuted a single person. But now I think we're just littered with traitors within the system. What do you think, Wayne?
Speaking of McCarthy, I'm also somewhat concerned about the relationship that Trump had in the 80s with Roy Cohn. In New York, and Roy Cohn. I mean, talking about, he was McCarthy's counsel on the committee, and Cohn later, was a very vicious person who, went after people and was tied up with the mob and Meyer Lansky and all stuff. So that doesn't give me any warm and fuzzy feelings to know that Trump basically Roy Cohn was his mentor back in the 1980s in business, and obviously Cohn helped Trump get to his position and vanquishing, I can't think of anything more cutthroat than a real estate business in Manhattan. So people think,
Cohn, I don't know if he got that through his father or what, but they helped each other.
He didn't have that much money, and he was basically out of the picture then. So Trump was on his own, but he had Roy Cohn basically running interference for him.
Well, I tell you something. I don't think there's anything about this upcoming election that gives me any warm and fuzzy feelings at all on either side.
Well, I just feel so. My own position, and the listeners are familiar, is that I'm just about anybody but Hillary. I mean, I can't imagine, for all of the faults that we've mentioned of Donald Trump, and let's multiply them by 10, I don't think it begins to approach what Hillary Clinton is capable of and what she's already done.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, everyone says, oh my God, he could do this, he could do this, he could do this. And my response to them is, well, that's all well and good. You're suggesting he could do it. Hillary's already done that and more.
She's proven herself.
And promises to do still more. And if she's talking about using this woman as her Secretary of Defense, somebody who's willing to start, launching cruise missiles in the general vicinity of Russian soldiers, I might, I'm a never Hillary kind of guy. I was a Bernie Sanders supporter for a while. But I tell you the truth, I'm registered independent. I would go down there and pull the lever for Donald Trump if it meant, scoring at least one more vote. That's not Hillary Clinton. I would do it.
It's really bad news. And like you say, she's already proven herself, with all this. It's a crystal ball about what Trump might do. This is no crystal ball, what she actually has done and what she wants to do and she's ready to do.
Yeah.
And let's not forget the role of Bill Clinton in this Clinton-Hillary administration. He's going to be occupying the office as the first lady, normally always occupied. And, and we know about his Clinton Foundation and all this. This was basically a extortion racket, pay to play. And what's he going to be doing inside the White House to extend, the Clinton, incorporated brand? Because that is not a marriage. It hasn't been a marriage for a long, long time. That's a business relationship.
And she was asked by reporters. She was asked if they would shut down the Clinton Foundation while she was president, and she specifically said no. There'll just be some transparency.
Yeah, probably they made a deal. She said to Bill, I'll make you a deal. You get me in the White House, and you can have Monica come back.
Well,
less work for me, which I haven't done in years.
Actually, I remember telling Mitt Romney in 2008 up at D.C. at an appearance. I said, Governor, I was not a Romney fan, by the way, but I said, Governor, you had the best line so far in the campaign. And he said, what's that? I said, when you said, I can't imagine Bill Clinton back in the White House with nothing to do. And I said, you knew what you were talking about.
Oh, he'll have something to do.
Hey, hi, y'all. I'm back. Having a good time, Yeah. Have you guys seen the commercial that this pro-Trump PAC has put together where they've got Bill saying, I never, ever, and then they switch to Hillary. Yes. I don't know anything about these emails. Anyways, I don't know. Let's see. I mean, let's just say he became president, Wayne. Do you think he really could do an about face on what he said about Putin and Russia?
Who's that? Trump?
Trump.
Look, again, it gets to the point: who's he going to surround himself with?
That's a good question. Yeah, good point.
If he brings in any neocons, well, they're going to do his talking for him, if not the walking for him. It makes perfect sense to patch things up with Russia and also stop this march to war that Obama started with, China. And
insane, absolutely insane.
It's insanity. There's no way we can take on these two countries at the same time. We can't take one on at the same time, unless Obama just wants to sacrifice the West Coast, which is an easy range of Chinese missile submarines that are sitting in Chinese waters. They can reach L.A. and San Francisco, and unless that's his point, it's hard to understand. One thing I do know about Obama from covering his administration is he is not that engaged. In the White House, he's not that engaged. And when he's on the camp and when he's on the speaking circuit, he'll go meet and greet the fundraisers in some swanky hotel, and then he goes to the presidential suite where he turns on ESPN and watch the game, whatever the game is, and that's it. That's all you get with him.
I wouldn't be surprised. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you for the work that you do. Wayne Madsen, Report.com, and American Everyman at willieloman.wordpress.com. I'll just finish off real quick. I thought a pretty good movie about Roy Cohn was made, Citizen Cohn, that was played by James Wood. I don't know how true it was, but it certainly was colorful. I can recommend it if anybody wants to see about it. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you very much. We'll be back on Thursday.